Washington, D.C. My goal is to serve on the Finance Committee under Mac Boxes and do the things that I think I can implement as a senator in providing for a better economic future for my family, for my children, and for my grandchildren. I've had a lot of experience in building a business the hard way. I've had a lot of experience personally in dealing with the entitlement state, and I know what it is to run a small government. I won in a town that's a 2-to-1 Democrat town 3 times on my commitment to fiscal conservatism and my policies, and I believe those policies resonate statewide.
Could you talk a little bit about what's going on in Washington today, and if you were down there, what would you do to try and move both sides off the dime? Would you compromise in any way? Is there any room for compromise down there?
There is room for compromise, and I believe the Republicans have offered that compromise. The Obamacare system is not ready to be implemented. It's fraught with problems, with an ill-defined bureaucracy. The President himself has unilaterally used his executive power, which is an issue, I believe 17 times in changing the law, particularly when he stalled the employer mandate for a year, understanding it couldn't be implemented. There are issues with the exchanges. There are significant questions and uncertainties, and it's creating way too much chaos in the economy. The Republican offer to simply postpone the implementation of Obamacare for 1 year, exactly like the President has offered some of his major corporate supporters, given them an out. Every American should have the same opportunity, and we should be funding government, although funding at a lower level. We should be funding government, and we should be putting this off for a year. It's only sound and I think logical to do that. So that is a compromise. Now, the President and Harry Reid have said, no, we're not compromising on anything. We want to jam through our program no matter what.
There have been a lot of stories that have come out about your opponent relating to some of his investments, tweeting a stripper. Mm-hmm. What are some of the biggest concerns you have? You obviously feel like you're a better candidate, but what are your concerns about your opponent?
My opponent has made politics his career and his life. He has spent a lot of time in Hollywood. We know that for a fact. Training for this position. He has put forth a record of what he calls turning Newark around, which is far from the truth. What we've seen happening in Newark in the last 7 years is an unemployment rate that has gone from 8 to 14%. Now, some people will say that's a function of the economy. However, hundreds of millions of tax dollars have been poured into Newark for corporate welfare, corporate subsidies, however you want to title it, special abatements for big corporations. And despite having almost half of the corporate welfare in the state going into Newark, unemployment has still hovered well above the state average. It's still at 14% and even higher for Newark teenagers, and considered by many even higher if you consider those who've dropped out of the work system. So that's hardly what I call Newark, turning Newark around. Just millions and millions of dollars and nothing to show for it but some political connections. You have a school system in Newark, which is the second most expensive in the state to Camden, one of the most expensive in the nation, and a high school dropout rate that ranges from 50 to 70%, depending on how you measure that. That's not acceptable. That's another failure. Again, I don't know how you say you turn Newark around. And of course, the most disturbing thing, which is the violent crime and the murders, recently 2 last night. 2 people shot to death on the streets of Newark last night. And while Cory Booker was parading around California for 2 weeks, people were dying in the streets of Newark. Mr. Booker has never run a real business, created a real job, has misrepresented himself to the public in terms of his record, and of course has managed to embellish stories about phony drug dealers and young men dying in his arms, which I find deeply disturbing, actually, that you would embellish on something like that. So I think it becomes a question of judgment and character. The issue of tweeting pole dancers, well, he'd rather tweet pole dancers than the poll numbers, because certainly there's nothing to brag about with what's happening in the polls.